Okay, now that we've got our coconuts out there for food and we've got a little lake that we can generate water from to satisfy our thirst, now we need to start putting all the components together in Blueprint so that they can work together. So where we're going to start is we need to start with our player. So I'm going to open up the content drawer. In content under third person blueprints is our Larry character blueprint. We're going to open it up. And we need to add some extra logic in here, let's start with hunger. We need a function that we can call from the player that restores hunger, that increases that hunger progress bar that we have on the overlay. Over here in functions, we're going to create a new function. We'll call this one, I'd like to call this maybe set hunger, but that's reserved for something else. So we're going to call this hunger setter, and we're going to use it to set the hunger value. And you'll see that we have our hunger setter beginning node here. And what we need to do now is create a function out of these nodes. We need to receive an input or a value, an integer that comes in and tells us how much we need to add to the current hunger value. So I'm going to add an input and we'll just call this amount, and this needs to be a float. All right, so now we're passing in a float anytime we call this function, hunger setter. And then we need to get our hunger, so we're going to grab it, we're going to get it, and we need to add to it. So pulling out from amount, we're going to hit the plus sign for add, and we're adding these two together. So again, when we call the function, it's going to take our current hunger value and add the amount we pass to it in the input. Okay, and then we need to set hunger, so set hunger to that new value. Now, this will work, except we do need a little bit of extra logic in here, because what happens if hunger goes over 100, for example? Well, that's going to possibly cause an issue if we're up in 150, but our progress bar only goes to 100. So it's going to look like our progress bar is never actually declining for a really long time again. So what we want to do is we want to prevent the hunger value from ever going over 100. So what we can do there is we can use what's called a branch. And a branch is like an if-else statement if you've used other programming languages. And it's going to see if something is true or if something is false. So what we need to do is when this amount comes in and we add them together, we need to find out, does this value equal over 100 when it comes in? So let's pull this pin off and do greater than. Because what we need to do is see, is this new value, is it greater than 100? Okay. If it's greater than 100, then this true condition is going to execute. Otherwise, it's not greater than 100, so this setter will execute. So what do we need to do for the true value? Well, we can just grab our hunger again, set hunger, and our hunger will be set to 100. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Again, what's happened is we call the function, we pass in the new amount that we're going to add to the hunger progress bar. That new amount comes in, it's added together with the current hunger value. If that value is over 100, then this condition happens and we just set hunger to 100, so it doesn't go over 100. If it does not equal over 100, then that value is passed in and set as the new hunger value. All right, so that will do it for the hunger setter. So we'll compile and save that. And since we're here, let's do the exact same thing for the thirst. Now there are ways that you could add these into one single function. We're going to do these individually just for ease of use here. So we'll do a thirst setter. So what I would suggest you do is pause this video and do the exact same workflow we just did for hunger and do it for thirst. And then come back and we'll finish this up. Okay, I hope you had a chance to give this a try yourself. Again, it's pretty simple. You kind of just work through it one node at a time, and it kind of comes together. So again, we need our thirst, and we need to get the current value. This, we need to make sure that we have an input. We can also call this amount. It's a float. Make sure that it's a float so it can be added together. Pull this one out. We are going to add these two values together. And then we're going to grab a branch to check to see if this new value is over 100. So we need to do this first. We need to do greater than. If this is greater than 100. If it's greater than, then we are going to set our thirst right here, set thirst to 100 so it doesn't exceed 100. Otherwise, we are going to set our thirst to this value right here. All right, did you get it? Hope you got it. Pretty easy stuff. All right, so save, compile. And now let's go hook up our coconut so that when we're in gameplay like this, we'll actually see our hunger value rise up as soon as we get near a coconut shell. So let's do that. One thing we do need to do is we need to set up a collision box for our coconut. So head to Content, Blueprints, and open up your coconut blueprint. By the way, this should be renamed to coconut _ blueprint. It doesn't need to be exactly like this. Just make sure you somehow designate this as a blueprint so you know the difference. And okay, so I'm in the coconut blueprint. So one thing we are missing here is some kind of a collision box. And the collision box not only is to cause collision or stop something from hitting it, or it can't walk through it. Collision also controls overlapping events. So we want a collision box so that we know when the player approaches the coconut, we can be able to now execute that function that we created. What we need to do is up here, we can add a collision. Let's add a sphere because that looks kind of like the coconut. I can just call this, rename this here, sphere collision. Okay. And then with that selected, I'm going to hit R. I'm going to make this a little smaller, just a little bit, just like that. That should be good. Okay, now we got our sphere collision. Now we need to add some logic around when the player approaches that sphere collision. So what we can do is we can right click on the sphere collision. We can add an event right here. This is a quick little shortcut. On component begin overlap right here. And we also need to add an event when the player steps away from the coconut, or end overlap, right? What are we going to do then when the player approaches the coconut or overlaps with its collision? All right, well, first thing we need to do is get our player. And if you remember how we do that, we need to use a cast operator to get the player. So cast to third person character Larry right here. Okay. And that will become the other actor. All right. And then once we've done that, then we can go get the function that we need, which is hunger setter. Here it is. Cool. So here's that here's that function we created to add to the hunger value. And right here, we can add the value. So right now we can add a static value here, like 10, or, when he picks up the coconut, it will increment in 20. So we could keep this a static value of 20, or we could create a variable, and maybe we just call this eat amount, whatever. And we can plug this variable, get it, and plug it in. And this variable will feed what the hunger setter will set. And if we make this instance editable over here, and if I was to save and compile this, let me pull this down here and go back to our main window and drag in a coconut. I'll show you over here. We have eat amount. So we can set this to 10, we can set this to 15, 20, whatever we want, and it will replenish that hunger value based on the value that we assign to this blueprint instance. And what's great is that we could assign different values over to this coconut as well. Back here could be a different value. So this one could be 10, while this one right here is 20, and so on. So you could set different values for each individual blueprint instance. So that's cool. One thing I will do that I didn't do is I'm going to jump back in here and let's create a default value of at least 10, maybe even 20. Just so we don't have coconuts out there that don't give us any replenishment to our hunger. Okay. Let's try it out. Save, compile. We got our coconut. This one was set to 20. Okay. Put this out here a little bit. See if this works. Okay, here's our guy. Here's our coconut over here. We're going to walk up to it and look at that. Our hunger jumped up. If I do it again. Boom, our hunger jumped up again. Now what we might want to do though is have this coconut disappear once we overlap with it. Okay, well let's jump back over to the coconut blueprint. And what we can do here is how about when we exit the collision, we could do it on the collision too, but let's say when we exit the collision, the coconut disappears from existence. Essentially, it's deleted from the scene. So first thing we got to do again is identify the actor. Whoops. Right here. That is overlapping or is now leaving from overlapping on the component. So same thing here. So now what do we do when this third person character leaves the collision? Okay, and then off of the third person character, we will look for destroy actor. There it is. We want to make sure that the target is the self or the actual blueprint that we're in. It will destroy that actor, and this should do it. So if we compile, let's give this a quick test. Play, and we get our hunger, and then we walk away, and it's gone. All right, it's working. Cool. You'll notice that when it actually disappeared, it disappeared entirely, even out of the world outliner. Now, when you stop the game, it is back in its original place. That's expected, but that is working, so that's great. Okay, so now for our thirst, let's go over to our lake. Oh, come on. Here we go. All right, what we'll do is we'll add a trigger volume right here in front of the lake that once we overlap with it, it will fill our thirst back up to 100. Okay, so let's come over here to create. We're going to create a new type of component called a volume. This is also like a post-process volume where you can enter in and out of the volume, but this one's a trigger volume. We'll create it like this. I'm going to hit R, and we're going to make sure that it kind of spans this whole area here. Okay, so anytime that the player, move this to the lake further. Let's see. Yeah. So unlike the hunger, like the coconuts, where we're only maybe incrementing by 10 or 20, this one will increment all the way. It will refill entirely up to 100. That's actually going to make our logic a little easier too. Okay, so here's that trigger box. And then to use a trigger box, what we need to do is go up to our blueprints, open our level blueprint. So in the level blueprint, all we have to do is right click and we can add an event for the trigger volume that we've added. And we need to add a collision, add on actor begin overlap. Okay. So when we overlap, we need to go get our other actor, obviously. So our third person actor, or character. I apologize. Object into other actor. Okay, so if that cast is successful, what do we need to do? Well, we need to grab thirst and thirst setter. And we are going to set the thirst all the way to 100. So it's going to pass in 100. Doesn't matter. It's going to try to go over 100. It can't. It's going to set it to 100. So great. Okay, compile and save. And that should do it. That should be able to replenish our thirst entirely. So what we can do is I'm going to back up here. Come up here a little bit so we're not under the ground. Right click and play from here. And your guy will drop. And our thirst, you'll see, is getting down about 25%. So I'm going to walk down by the water. And that did not work. So why didn't it work? Let's see. Let's go check our code. Must have messed something up. Let's go back into our level blueprint. So this all looks right. So let's go look at our coconut. Actually, was it not saved? It's possible. Oh, no, it looks like it was compiled. Okay, let's go back to our coconut. Let's go back to, I'm sorry, not our coconut, our third person character. Thirst setter, and here it is. Look at this. Maybe you saw that, and you were probably yelling at me. Yeah, we did not connect our execution pins. So let's try this again. Compile and save. Back to Castaway. I'm going to come over here. Again, I like to come up kind of high so I don't end up spawning into the ground. And I can right click and play from here. The guy drops in. Let's try it again. Come on down by the water and okay. Now our thirst is totally replenished. All right. Last thing we need to do is we need to, over time, have the hunger and the thirst indicators dropping. So in the next video, we will set up our logic so that our hunger and our thirst progress bars gradually fall over time, while our rescue bar gradually raises over time. And we'll also throw in some other logic to watch if the hunger or thirst bars ever hit 0, they're going to deduct from the health bar.